I'm rapidly coming to the conclusion that I'm the last person on Earth who knows what Miss Brightwell likes." Carson's small face tightened with sudden alarm.
"Was that her on the phone just now?"
"Uh-huh.
"She turned you down again?"
Afraid so."
"Geez, Dad, you gotta stop calling her up all the time and bothering her."
Carson thrust out his hands, exasperated.
"You're gonna ruin everything for me if you make her mad. She might not pick any of my pictures."
"I don't call her all the time." Damn. Now he was on the defensive with his own son. "I've only called her half a dozen times since Lillian's show." He had been so sure that things had clicked between himself and Octavia that evening. The proprietor of Bright Visions, an art gallery business with 2 stores, one in Portland and one here in Eclipse Bay, Octavia had staged a gala reception to display his sister's work. The entire town had been invited, and most of the locals had turned out for the show. The crowd had included everyone, from Virgil Nash, owner of Virgil's adult books and video arcade, to the professors and instructors of nearby Chamberlain College. Several members of the staff at the Eclipse Bay Policy Studies Institute had also deigned to appear. They had all crowded into Bright Visions to drink good champagne, nibble on expensive hors d'oeuvres, and pretend to be art connoisseurs for a night. Nick had walked into the crowded room, taken one look at Octavia, and immediately forgotten that he was there to view Lillian's paintings. The image he carried in his head of Octavia from that night was still crystal clear. She had worn a pale, fluttery dress that fell to her ankles and a pair of dainty, strappy little heels that had emphasized her elegantly arched feet. Her dark red hair had been brushed back behind her ears in a style that had framed her interesting, delicately molded features and mysterious sea-green eyes. His first impression was that, although she was in this world, she was not completely anchored to it. There had been an ethereal, almost fey quality about her. Perhaps she was a fairy queen, visiting from some other magical dimension where the rules were a little different. He had stayed as close to her as possible that evening, aware of a visceral need to lure her to him and secure her by whatever means required. He did not want to allow her to float back to wherever it was she had come from. The unfamiliar sense of possessiveness had made him want to bare his teeth and show some fang whenever another man had hovered too long in her vicinity. It was a completely over-the-top reaction, coming, as it did, after nearly 4 years of practicing what his sisters annoyingly described as commitment-free serial monogamy. Okay, so he'd had a few discreet affairs. If anything, that should have made him all the more immune. The truth was, he had been stunned and bemused by his own reaction to Octavia. The only saving grace was that he had gotten the distinct impression that she was just as attracted to him as he was to her. Something in her big, sea-colored eyes had registered her interest in him. It had come as a shock at the end of the evening when she had politely turned down his invitation to dinner. He'd convinced himself that he'd heard regret in her voice, so he'd tried again a few days later when they were both back in Portland. She had declined a second time with the explanation that she had to rush back to Eclipse Bay. It seemed the assistant she had left in charge of the gallery there, Noreen Perkins, had resigned without notice in order to run off with one of the artists whose work was exhibited in Bright Visions. Octavia had returned to Portland on only one other occasion after that, and her stay had been extremely brief. He had asked her out for the 3rd time, but she had told him that she was there to oversee a reception for one of the artists who had showed in her gallery and had no time to socialize. The following morning, she had flitted back to Eclipse Bay. It had become obvious that she was not going to return to Portland anytime soon. That had left him a limited number of options. 2 weeks ago, he had made the decision to spend the summer in Eclipse Bay with Carson. But proximity was only making Octavia more inventive when it came to excuses for turning down dates. The thing that should really concern him, he thought, was that he was working even harder to come up with reasons to call her one more time. As far as he could tell, she did not have a complete aversion to men. She had been seen having dinner with Jeremy Seaton twice this past week. Jeremy was